G'day, Josh here with a Chess Rush tier list, and for this video I've actually recruited a special guest. If you have been around the community for a little while, maybe on the official Discord, or you've been checking out some of the tournaments that take place, you will definitely know who this guest is. Warreor. Last season in Chess Rush, season 0 technically, Warreor hit King rank in both Turbo and Classic. Also, as I talked about, competes in a ton of tournaments at a very, very high level. Now, last season, Warreor, I think you also got very close to hitting King in cooperative as well. Is that correct?
That's right. Thanks for the nice introduction there. And yeah, I ended up at Queen 8. My goal was originally to be like the first person to hit triple King, but eventually as the season came closer to an end, I decided to just stick with the double King and didn't go for the third one.
So you're essentially 2 ranks away from triple King. So to me, that's basically triple King. That's a pretty significant effort.
We can call it that, right?
That
we can put a little asterisk at the end of triple King.
Absolutely. So I think that experience plus your pretty consistent high performance in various tournaments that you partake in gives you a pretty good basis of understanding to be chatting to me today about the various combos and exactly where they sit on the tier list in Chess Rush.
Yeah, for sure. I think that before I started playing Chess Rush, I was playing Auto Chess Mobile a ton. Like I had hundreds of games in that. So it really gave me a leg up on kind of the knowledge and some of the intricacies of how these games work going into this game. So that's why I was kind of able to keep a higher win rate. But yeah, I think the meta's in a really good spot right now, and there's a ton of good comps that we can talk about.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the meta being in a pretty healthy place. Chess Rush has been my first experience to the genre, and I've definitely learnt a ton from you as I've been working my way up through the ranks. So let's jump in. I'm going to talk through each of the combos that are actually listed in the app in the hero book. So we'll kick things off with humans. And at this point, I guess we'll just talk about the max combo. So for humans, that's 6 of them. The max combo being they restore 7 mana per second, and ally humans have a 50% chance to reset the ability cooldown and restore 100 mana after casting an ability. We're going to use a pretty regular tier list system where S is your top tier all the way down through to F for that. The bottom tier, you really don't want to be running that. In your opinion, where do humans rank? And this is going to be a little bit weird because this is kind of in a vacuum. We're just talking about humans here. Towards the end of the video, we'll start dissecting some of the ways that the combos work with other combos as well. But for now, just humans as they are, where would you rank them?
Mm-hmm. I would have to say that humans as a synergy overall have to be S tier right now. They the recent buffs helped them a lot, and they're just such an explosive comp that they're not something that should be always forced necessarily. A lot of people think that if something's top tier, it has to be forced all the time. But when you can get 6 humans going and you can get ahead early, it's stoppable. So I've got to say S tier for that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And they're actually one of the more fun synergies for me personally to use. I'm just looking through the hero book now, and you have quite a few high-end heroes as well. 3 epics, in fact, Lightbringer, General of War, and Dragoon, which definitely helps that out.
Absolutely. And yeah, with how Lightbringer has been buffed recently, she can just be such an impactful unit and just do that huge burst damage. And even though she might not top the DPS charts, just getting that huge burst to kill things quickly, especially with everybody running Warlock, is just really nice.
Yeah, definitely.
Same with Flamecaller.
Moving right along to elves, where would you rank elves on the tier list?
As far as the 6 synergy goes for elves, I would say something maybe like C tier, to be honest.
Just as a reminder, and I probably should talk through each of these as I'm talking about them as well, 6 elves does grant ally elves a 44% chance to dodge. So it's a nice combo, but I think in the current meta, crowd control and area of effect stuff still generally hits it most of the time.
Yes, so whenever a unit is stunned or CC'd, the dodge chance goes away. So if you get hit by a Kraken ult or whatever, that dodge chance is worthless. So you have such a high unit investment for something that can be negated by almost every build.
Yeah, definitely risky to run. What about beasts? So 6 beasts give allies a 60% chance to summon a pet at the beginning of battle.
really strong right now. I see, especially in some of the modes like squad, where you can really build up a huge army. Beats do really well. That being said, they are a bit of an early to mid game comp, and not something that you necessarily want to run six of in an end game comp, unless you're extremely far ahead and you're just snowballing.
Yeah.
I don't know. For beasts, I'd say B tier. What do you think?
Yeah, I think BTS feels about right for me. I think you're spot on in my experience as well. They can be incredibly overpowering if you get a strong beast comp early to mid
Hmm.
game, but they can fall off late game. I guess the main goal with six beasts is to actually eliminate your opponents during that mid game, so you never actually reach the end game.
Exactly. If you can be dealing enough damage and you're matching up with the right people and just wiping everybody out, beasts can just crush a game out of nowhere. But as far as end game optimal builds go, there's too much AOE for them to stay alive really in the late game.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So the next one being cyborgs. We'll actually talk about cyborgs and engineers together, as it's basically impossible to run them without using both. So 6 cyborgs increases ally cyborgs armor by 75 and health regen by 30, and 4 engineers increases health regen of all ally engineers by 150. Where do cyborg engineers sit on the tier list for you?
So I'm sure a lot of Cyborg has got to be S tier. That the argument could definitely be made to put it in S tier, but I'm actually going to say it's A tier right now. Reason being, it is extremely powerful, and if you can get it online early, it's another one of those builds that can just take over the game. But that being said, there are builds that can beat it at end game, full build, optimal time frame. So it's really, like I said, I think that it's not quite as good as it used to be, and I'm going to say A tier.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think it definitely relies quite heavily on getting the one legendary, one of
Hmm.
the 2 key legendary engineers. So if you don't find that 6 piece, you're in a little bit of trouble. So you have to kind of farm levels pretty quickly to get to level 9, so you have that 3% chance at rolling one of those legendaries. And as you said, it
Exactly.
still can get beaten by a couple of endgame builds. So I think A tier is spot on for me.
Yeah, it's one of those builds that it can be extremely powerful and great to run in certain circumstances, but it doesn't have the same consistency that some of the other builds will bring by having flexible pieces. It's not flexible at all. You need the exact units that you need, and that's that.
That's a very good point, yeah. So speaking of exact units, the next one's an interesting one, as a couple of their units did recently get a buff. 4 furries, which give all ally furries a shield that absorbs 2,000 damage. Has the recent buffs to Starhorn and Firefur moved them up the tier list at all, or where do they sit for you?
Now, I'm kind of at the middle grounds with the furries. I've been trying to incorporate 4 furry more and more into my builds, and individually, other than Vanguard, they're all actually really good units, especially in the early and mid game. The problem lies with the build not really scaling. It's when you get in early, so you have it in the early, mid, early, late games phases, and that synergy buff of 2000, I think it's 2000 HP, right? Yeah, 2000
Yeah,
HP
yeah.
shield is really strong, but it's not scaling at all. So I don't really feel there's a need to have it in an end game comp. It's one of those things you use, but you don't really want to have in your final build.
Yeah, it's an interesting one for me. I do definitely appreciate the buffs that Firefur and Starhorn got, but by the
Hmm.
time you usually find Starhorn as your 4th furry, you kind of don't want to be running Bangar anymore. And there are just better, like Riders and Warriors are both better tanky classes to be running, and they're easier to find enough pieces to run them. So it's definitely an interesting one for me. Where do you rank it on the tier list?
Yeah, the other thing I was going to mention is that their class synergies, so their race synergies obviously are furry, but the class synergies are all very spread out on them too. They don't really fit into a lot of the same end game builds. You can make it work in the middle game, but
That's a very
Starhorn's
good
really
point.
good in
Yeah.
sorcerers,
Yeah.
and Wukong can be good in warriors and stuff, but there's not a lot of build where you're using all of them. I'm gonna say C tier for furries, maybe even D tier to be honest.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna say
I
D.
personally would say D as well,
Yeah.
which is a little bit disappointing because I want them to be good, and
Hmm.
individually some of the key pieces are, but I guess their max combo just lets them down a little bit, as well as what you're mentioning in that they don't necessarily have the best synergies amongst each other than the Furry.
Hmm.
So moving on to goblins. 4 goblins increases attack speed by 35% for all allies and an additional 35% for ally goblins. Where do you rank 4 goblins on the tier list?
So I have not ran four goblins that much recently, and I've seen it pop up a little bit more, especially in like 6 rider builds, and it definitely has a lot of power. Uh, that being said, I mean, Totem Face is such a weak unit to have in your build most of the time, and I know I know it's practically a meme at this point of how Totem Face is just kind of there, but rating goes for running for a goblin, I would say probably C tier. It can work, but it's not really something that I strive to build very often.
Yeah, I would definitely place some C or even D depending on the day. Maybe
I'd say
the
they're maybe a
turbo.
little that's a little bit better than the four. For I would much rather have four goblin buff late game because at least it
Yeah, that's a good
scales.
point. That is a good point. And
But
Berserker
it's close.
Berserker is a very good unit. Voodoo Elder is a Warlock, but the other two aren't amazing. Hog Rider and Totem Face. Hog Rider is only really useful as he has 3 synergies, and as you said, Totem Face is basically a meme at this point.
Yeah, I mean, Hog Rider's up the game is like a great synergy activator unit, like you said, because it can fill a lot of different spots. It's very flexible. Can be used as a tank early game, so it's a good unit. But we're talking like as far as the 4 goblin goes, using all 4 of them in a late game build. Hog Rider is one of the first units you cut often. So
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to Undead. 4 Undead reduces the armor of all enemies by 50. Where do you rank Undead amongst the tier list?
So Undead's a little unique because the two out of 4 Undead is extremely strong throughout pretty much the entire game, but especially it's one of the best buffs you can get going in almost any build early game because the units inherently aren't going to have much armor. So very, very, very strong. Even 4 Undead can do really well in certain builds if it just happens to be an assassin or something like that. But I don't know. So are we ranking it as a four of Undead or the
No,
whole
I
on the
think
synergy on all?
I think what you've spoken about raises a good point. I think we should actually rank them based on the usability of the combo. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the max combo because exactly as you touched on, I very rarely use 4 Undead, but I often use 2 Undead because it is, as you said, very, very strong at all stages of the game.
And the Undead units are all just so flexible. Like they can fit in so many different. You can get 2 Undead in it very easily without sacrificing anything.
And it has 2 incredibly valuable late game units in Misfortune being an Undead Warlock and Apocalypse, who, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that a maxed out Apocalypse is the hero that can deal the most damage in the game.
Biggest burst, yeah. Biggest burst of one spell would be a 3-star Dark Mage. It's 1200 damage, 12.
Yeah, which is crazy. So, yeah. So Undead, we've definitely determined that it is incredibly useful. Where do you rank it on the tier list? Does it hit S tier for you?
I'm going to say it does hit S tier because the reason is it's just so valuable as an overall synergy throughout the game. It's good late game. It's good early game. It counters a lot of the popular builds. It's just an incredible synergy to have at any time. So I'm going to go S tier.
Yeah, I agree, with the caveat being that it's probably not your primary combo, but it's an incredible secondary combo to most builds in the game. The next one in game is Demon, but I guess we really want to talk about Punisher. Having 1 Demon is useful, but not mandatory. But the Punisher combo is really where you take advantage of multiple demons. So we'll actually continue with Oceanborn, Void Dragon, and Jelly, and then we'll come across to Punisher. So we'll just skip Demon for now. So going to Oceanborn, this is another interesting one. Very strong individual heroes, but the max combo itself is quite unique. So 4 Oceanborns give a random ally ability immunity for 60 seconds. Now, 60 seconds is the full length of a battle. So basically, a random hero on your board will not take any damage from abilities. Where do Oceanborn rank for you and why?
So, like you said, Oceanborn is a unique one, and it's definitely one that I want to play around with more. Especially in regards to getting 4 Oceanborns in there. Units are all really, really strong. As a 4 of, I do think that the 4 of bonus is a little lackluster. It can be game saving, but then again, it can do absolutely nothing.
If you
It's
get
not
unlucky with
like
the randomness of it, yeah.
exactly, and it has to go on a relevant unit, and then that unit has to end up being targeted by single target spells. AoE spells. I guess it will ignore AoE spells too. Yeah, so it
Well,
will
we
ignore
don't
it
really know.
individually,
Yeah,
right?
assumption is that it would, but we don't actually have that clarified.
Yeah, so I don't know. And two ocean people running human and Sorc lately is actually really strong too. So it's a good synergy, especially considering how powerful the units are, but not something you really ever like. It's going to make or break your build whether you get 2 or 4 Oceanborn in there. The units themselves might, but not the synergy.
Yeah, each individual unit is quite strong, and they all actually have decent synergies with other combos as well. But you're
Hmm.
spot on in that the Oceanborn combo itself doesn't actually rank that high. I would probably personally place it D tier for the combo itself, with once again an asterisk that all of the individual units are actually quite strong and usable in various comps.
Those things that's like a cool little bonus if you get it, but it's not something that's really going to make or break your comp. I kind of wish that the 4 Oceanborn bonus was just more magic resist instead of a
Yeah,
random ally
yeah, I agree with
becoming
that.
immune. It
Something to
sounds really
combat.
cool and it could be really impactful ability, but like 80% of the time it's going to do almost nothing because most of the
Yeah.
abilities are AoE, so they're going to go off anyways.
So
Even if that unit ignores it. So yeah, I'd agree with D. I'd say you could maybe make an argument for C just because of how good the units are. Excuse me, but I think I'm fine with D.
yeah, it's an interesting one because we do kind of have to separate the units themselves from the combo in this specific case. Now,
Hmm.
speaking of a random max combo, 2 voids decreases a random enemy's max health by 50%. Now, once again, the individual void heroes are quite strong, but where does that combo rate for you?
I'm gonna go ahead and say that's our first F rank because
Yeah,
I think that it is the worst synergy in the game. And while it can be kind of helpful, you have a 1 in 10 chance, of hitting the exact unit you would want or whatever, a very good unit. But most of the time, it just ends up being on some backline who just heals back from Warlock.
I must admit, other than when I was first learning the game, I have never intentionally sought to achieve 2 void.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it
Yeah.
incidentally occurs when I'm building sorcerers and also 2 warlocks, but that's about it.
Yeah, it's with sorcerers it can be nice too because maybe your void destruction ult or flame caller ult hits that unit. It's just one of those ones that's just not consistent. There are so many very consistent synergies that there's no use point going after the inconsistent ones.
Yeah, the random combos definitely are a little bit awkward. So I can't argue with the F tier on that one there. Moving it right along to dragon synergy. When you have 3 dragons, you restore 100 mana instantly at the beginning of battle for allied dragons, which basically means that they all trigger their abilities immediately. Where does dragon synergy sit for you? Because this is a bit of an interesting one.
Dragon's interesting as well, and I think it actually is pretty underplayed in this game. It's been proven in the other auto chess that the 3 dragon builds and like 3 dragon 6 rider is an efficient build as far as what you spend on the units to how much power you're actually putting out. Um, on as far as a complete comp goes, so they're really good value units, and I think it has a lot of potential. Other good things right now. That's the problem with them. I think is there are so many other like add-on comps, at 2 to 3 or 4 unit
Yeah.
comps
Yep.
that you would want to use instead of the dragon, like undead or warlock or something like that.
It feels like it's a very specific situation that you would want to be using this in, and most of the time it would be if you're running riders just to get your dragoon triggered
Yeah.
instantly. That's about
Yeah.
it in my eyes.
Six rider 3 dragon is a really good comp in some of the other games, and you're able to corner your dragoon, and then it just snipes the whole time. And if you can get a 3-star dragoon, it's extremely powerful. Starting off as a dragon with that AOE attack splash damage. So I'll put dragon in C tier. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think C tier
And
is what I'm feeling as well. It's such a special use case, but in that instance, it can be very, very strong.
exactly. Yeah.
Now, we will quickly touch on Jelly, even though it doesn't
Just
actually
throw it
do
S
anything.
plus. I think we just throw an S, make an S plus tier just for the Jelly.
It's basically
Best unit in the game.
the only hero in the game that is 100% bite all of the time.
And if it loses your interest, it doesn't matter if anything. You buy the unit no matter what. Yep.
It's awesome. All right, so Punisher. Now, we briefly touched on this when we skipped past Demon earlier. So 4 Punishers increases your normal attack. Sorry, let me start again. 4 Punishers. Normal attacks deal 35% physical damage to the units around or within 1 grid the target for ally Punishers. Now, when you have multiple Punishers, all your demons are also Punishers. So essentially, all of your demons, all of your Punishers are dealing additional damage, and they're doing damage in an area of effect mana around them in 1 grid as well. This is a little bit of an interesting one, as you need a couple of key specific pieces, kind of like Cyborg Engineers. If you don't find them, you're not really going to get this working. So where does Punisher rate for you?
So I personally love Punishers, and I incorporate them in my mid-game strategies all the time. If I can find the Nightingale and like I jump on them right away. One of the things a lot of people don't realize too is the Nightingale actually gets AoE damage from the Punisher buff as well. It's not just the demons, and she has true damage on her attack. So I don't know if the true damage splashes as well, but either way, it's just another AoE unit in there. And
yeah,
Punisher, if you find it early, is probably the most powerful early and mid. It's kind of the inverse of Cyborgs in that way, where it's if you find the pieces, then you're Cyborg. But if you find the pieces early game with Punisher, there's not much that's, especially if you can get that early power. So
yeah,
extremely strong.
It's an interesting one. You definitely have to run it with something else because you're sort of maxing out at 4 Punisher of those 3 of which are demons.
It's a really good complement build. The Punishers, though, is they do fall off when it gets later and later. Keep them to dominate throughout the entire game, starring that Devourer. Another Demon 3-star can work as well, but you really want a 3-star your Devourer. And if you can manage to do that, just that in the last tournament that we just finished, I was able to win with my partner, Dark Magician, by getting that 3-star Devourer. If I didn't save my Guru that I found really early the entire game, and then wait till I found another one, use the Druid, and then 3-starred the Devourer, if I didn't do that, then my comp would have completely fallen off. But that unit can single-handedly carry almost anything. Once you get there.
Just to fill everyone in on that, so Warreor's talking about Premier Game co-op tournament, and in the last round of the high ELO challenge, there was a very early Punisher pairing for you. I think you found Nightingale and Devourer within the first 3 or 4 rounds, and that carried all the way through to winning that round.
Yeah, it ended up being a really good game, and I was actually stuck at 2 Punishers for a while, but even just running the Devourer and without the Nightingale, if you don't have any other demons, is really good early game. So I'm a huge fan of Punishers, but due to their lack of consistency in getting it, as well as being able to flesh out a full endgame build for them, I'm going to say they're probably B tier, to be honest.
Yeah, okay. So B kind of on the verge of A if it was a little bit easier to find all of the key pieces.
They could definitely be A tier too, just because of how strong they are early and mid. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't mind putting them in A also, if you think.
Yeah, I could see them sitting in A. I definitely agree that they're incredibly strong early, and if you build it right, they can also win late. So it's a tricky one, kind of like Cyborg Engineers, but I think even trickier. But I'm okay with A.
Very item dependent build too, because if you can stack some items on the Devourer, like 4 swords, 4 armors, anything really.
Yeah.
He can just become the single biggest carry unit in the entire game. Like, I don't think there's another carry as hard as a fully stacked Devourer. Even a Sword Dancer.
Does crazy damage, yeah.
It's insane. With Warlock too, he could become so tanky from all that AoE lifesteal. So yeah, I think A tier is good.
All right, if you're good with A, I'm good with A. Let's move on to Druid. So the Druid one is another pretty unique full combo. If you have 4 druids, then 2 identical 2-star druids can be combined to form a 3-star hero instead of requiring 3 copies. And they also restore 20 mana for all allies within 1 grid upon death. Now that basically doesn't do a whole lot, but the ability to level up without needing 3 copies of a hero can be pretty strong. Early on, druids did get a little bit of a nerf to take off some of their top-end health just to counteract that, because they were incredibly strong when the game first launched. Where do they sit in your eyes now, given the current meta?
Druids are very similar to beasts, in my opinion. They really take over in an early game and snowball it out of control if it's able to end it quick enough. But it can really fall off once the late game hits and other builds start to come.
Yeah.
Undead also counters druids, and so many people, and all of the druid units have inherently very low armor, much armor. So undead just cripples them, and same with AoE because of the summons from Everbloom, the Witch Doctor, and the Night Owl. Still a very useful synergy to use, and if you find druids early, it's a great source to throw in there. I'm gonna say but I don't know. What do you think?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the tier rating there. Your mic just cut out as you were saying.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say probably a solid C.
Yeah, I agree with that.
C tier. They could be B tier also though. It's tough.
I think on their own, C is about right. They do have a couple of beasts and a couple of elves, but as we've talked about, elves and beasts aren't necessarily top tier themselves anyway at this point. One of the most useful things about Druid in this stage is actually picking up one so that you can 2-star a guru really simply.
Yep, that's what I mostly use druids for. I very rarely touch druids because I just think there's so many other comps that you can run early game that unless you're just seeing a ton of 2-star druids, then I'll throw them in. But I'll still always be looking to transition out just because there's just so many things that are more powerful.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Night Owl's a great. Night Owl's one of the best value units in the game as far as the stats he brings between his stats and the bear. But a synergy on the whole, not that great.
Yeah. Can't argue. All right, moving on to a much more interesting combo, Warlock. This is a little bit like Undead in that most of the time you're probably not running 4, but 4 does increase lifesteal of all allies by 25%. Excess health from lifesteal becomes a shield, so it doesn't go to waste. Where does Warlock rank for you?
Warlock is S+. In my opinion, there's no other synergies that can bring as much power through 2 units, or even any synergies. I mean, the amount of sustain and tankiness that just having 2 Warlocks brings into your comp is insane, because every unit is getting lifesteal off of their attacks and their spells, and so many of these comps are running big AoE, huge damage spells. So a huge spell goes out that does a huge chunk of damage, and then that unit just fills back up with life because
absolutely.
There's no diminishing returns. Yeah, there's no, some games will have less, a portion of your lifesteal applied to AoE effects, but you get full lifesteal. So
it does feel very, very powerful in this game, that's for sure. And I think at all stages throughout the game, the individual units are quite strong. You obviously don't want to be running the tier 2 units in late game, but when you pick them up in the early mid game, they are actually quite decent individual units as well.
Every single one of the Warlocks is a great unit themselves. They're great to have in really at any stage of the game. And Misfortune and Void Doom are like, the 2 of them can be slotted into any build and they will just be amazing. Those are like 2 of the top 5 best units in the game. And they especially Misfortune, just because she has Undead also. But if you can get Void Doom to 2-star, 70%.
2-star Void Doom. 2-star Void Doom is incredible, absolutely. The true damage that he does with his ability. Yeah,
he does 50% of all the units max HP over 10 seconds at 1-star and 70% at 2-star. So just having 70% of negated damage, there's no way it can be mitigated at all. There's just no other unit that really brings that much sheer power and damage. And then Misfortune with her basically adding 2 Warlock buffs because she also has that massive AoE heal.
Yeah. So true damage, for those that aren't aware, basically ignores magic resist and armor. So there is no way to prevent it. Does it also ignore shields, or does it deal the damage to the shields first?
I believe it does damage to the shield first when it comes to like
Yeah.
the overheal that people get from lifesteal and any shields like that. I don't believe it goes through shields like sword dance. It does do damage ticks, but each tick of damage from Void Doom's ultimate will remove one layer of shield from Sword Dancer.
Yeah,
It
sure.
won't go through it, but it does chunk it down really fast at like Wukong or anything like that.
Yeah. So moving on to a combo in Hunters, it actually used to be quite good in the old meta, but I feel has dropped off a little bit. When you have 6 Hunters, you increase the attack damage of all Hunters by 60%. How do you feel like they've held up through the recent meta changes?
I personally love Hunters, Son. I use them in early game and mid game. Probably more than 50% of my games. It's one of my favorite comps to look for in the early game to just carry me through. The units all synergize really well with other different comps, so kind of no matter what else you're working on, the Hunters can be a nice complement to it. The Undead Hunter, the Rider Hunter, the Elf Hunter, and then, your big boy Hunters. I love Fire Fur too. If you can get a 2-star Fire Fur early, it just does 10k damage every round out of nowhere. Like, really good early 2-star that not a lot of people run. That being said, like you were talking about before, they do fall off more. They fell off from where they used to be as far as their overall power, and they can get blown up by a lot of the AoE spells because they have really low defenses. I mean, if we're talking 6 Hunter comp, I want to say D tier, to be honest. Like, I don't think 6 Hunter comp is very viable in this current meta.
Yeah. I think
3 Hunters could be A.
I think that's right. I think you'd be silly to use 6 Hunters. It's just not viable at all. But 3 Hunters as an additional combo or synergy, and this is where it gets interesting, right? Because do you want to be running Hunters over, say, Warlocks and Undead? Well, probably not. But they do also have quite strong individual units. Kraken and Shakaraka are both incredible. They're both Oceanborn Hunters, which gives you a little bit of magic resist. They both have area of effect stuns that are currently broken and affect the entire board. So if we're just talking about 3 Hunters...
Extremely strong. I would say 3 Hunters are A tier. The thing, though, with 3 Hunters is I'll use 3 Hunters, like I said, in a majority of my games. But when it comes down to the very end of the game and I'm at my final 10 units, 3 Hunter will be a buff that I cut to implement a buff that scales better because, 25% attack damage in the early game is great, but in the very late game, it matters less and less kind of as the game goes on. It does scale with units levels and everything, but it's just not that big of a buff when it comes down to the overall damage that units are putting out at that. Still, I'll use 2 Hunters all the time and 2 Warlocks and Undead. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I think that's the way to rank it. It sits in at A tier with the understanding that you're probably not going to be running 6 of them and you may transition out of them at the very end game.
I'm good with that.
Totally fine. You're not going to be running every combo at the late game. So next we run into one of the strongest combos since the launch of the game in Riders. 6 Riders give a 60% chance to get 185 armor and 60% magic resistance for all ally riders. Quite strong. Where do Riders sit in the current meta for you?
We're making a huge comeback from what I've seen and how I felt playing over the last few days. Especially more and more people are going 6 Riders, and it's an extremely strong comp. I kind of wish, is it possible to do an S plus tier as well? Because I feel like I want to put it in S tier, but like I want to put Warlock. So I guess it's A tier. I don't know. I'm a bit about Riders. I'm gonna say A tier. What do you think?
Yeah, I think. I definitely feel like they're making a little bit of a comeback, a resurgence, as you touched on. I agree with A tier. They're not quite as powerful as the top end stuff, but they're incredibly versatile throughout the entire game because they're easy to find early, they're easy to find late. You don't even need to run 6 of them for them to be quite good. You can just run 4 of them. A couple of them are humans, which is really useful as well. I definitely agree with A tier.
Yeah, they're just a very versatile comp, and they also, if you're like, I'm going riders this game, and you get given the riders early, and you work on just building your riders, and you can get a few of them 3-starred by the end game. I mean, when you see that full rider comp against you with a bunch of 3 stars, like that's scary. That can
Yeah.
destroy a lot of comps, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like it's always good. So, but yeah, like we said, not necessarily the absolute best high end, ceiling of power.
So, speaking of high-end power ceilings, we're going to move on to sorcerers now. 6 sorcerers reduce enemy magic resistance by 60%. But sorcerers on their own are quite powerful, especially the top-end heroes. Where does running sorcerers fit in for you in terms of ranking them on the tier list? And also, are you trying to run 3 or 6 of them?
So I think that sorcerers have got to be S tier now. They're just so strong with the new Lightbringer and Starhorn, and they have so many good units like Flamecaller who can carry pretty much any fight. Frost Lotus is an incredible one cost, maybe the best statted one cost in the game as far as what her ultimate does. Um, yeah, I think they have to be S tier. I mean, 6 sorcerers is a little bit more. You can't run 6 orcs quite as commonly as you can run. You can run 3 sorcerers all the time, and a ton of different builds. Almost every unit, their ultimate uses magic damage. There's only very few units that ultimates deal physical damage. So that 3 sorcerer buff is helping all of those units, even if they're not sorcerers. Your
Yeah.
sharks, your krakens, your any of those units are getting really big, really nice increases from the sorcerer buff. So that, alongside the potential for a full 6 sorcerer comp, if it gets ahead, that can
That's
just blow up
terrifying.
anything that comes
Absolutely
across.
terrifying. The other
Doesn't
thing that
matter
I've
what.
noticed since the recent Lightbringer and Starhorn buffs that you touched on, I'm actually seeing people run Lightbringer as a utility unit in some builds, even if they're not running Sorcerer, just because she as an individual hero is so incredibly strong with her burst damage.
Yeah, she's becoming like Kraken, and some of those other four that, like, whenever you see her in shop, you should be thinking about buying her, whether you're running
Yeah.
humans, whether you're running Sorks or whatever. Because if you can get her to 2-star, especially, you can throw her in anything, and she's gonna burst down, half the field. So an extremely powerful and just impactful unit to throw into pretty much any.
Yeah, definitely. So now we move on to assassins. 6 assassins give ally assassins the chance to become invisible at. Sorry, not a chance. They do become invisible at the beginning of the battle, and the first normal attack deals 300% damage. Normal attacks after that have a 25% chance to make assassins invisible again, which I also assume then triggers that crit again once they've become invisible for the second,
Correct.
third, fourth
Yep.
time.
Yeah, so basically it's their crit chance, and they also
Yeah,
become
awesome.
invisible.
Where do you
No
rank
doubt.
them? They're
I
an interesting one at this point in time.
I think assassins have to be S tier also. 6 assassin is such a strong build. If you can get 3 assassins going early, and then you have so much flexibility of whether you want to stick with the assassins, if you want to go into anything else. You get a couple 2-star assassins going early, especially like Stinger with an undead buff. Lilith's an incredible unit. Siren and Horn Menace, with their stuns. It's just, there's so many good assassins, and 6 assassin, 3 elf, 2 undead, 2 warlock could be the number 1 build in the game right now if you can get ahead with it. I think that Sword Dancer is just so incredibly strong, and if you can get all the units to 2-star, it's easier to come on. It's a little bit easier to get online than some of the other full and late game builds. It comes online a little bit sooner because all you really need is the 6 units. You don't necessarily need to have all of them 2-starred like in some of the 6 war. So I'd say it's powers combined with its ease of use and consistency. I think it's got to be S tier right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if at any point in time you are able to 3-star a maxed out Sword Dancer in terms of items, it basically becomes impossible to then lose that game. So
exactly, it's one of those units like I was saying with Devourer earlier, that like if you can get the unit to 3-star, there's not much stopping that can be done for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's only a few units in the game that can really carry a build no matter what, and Sword Dancer at 3 stars, if not the best.
Yeah. All right, so our final combo warrior, when you have 6 of them, it increases armor of all ally warriors by 100. And I do note the irony in our final combo also with your tag as well. So that's quite.
That's right.
Good.
My name Warrior comes from my real life name being Warren. So that's why it kind of plays. But I do love me some Warrior. I'm gonna put this build in S tier.
Yeah.
Because I've been a big advocate of the Warrior power ceiling, its consistency, its early, mid, and late game potential. I still think it's probably the most consistent build in the game, and maybe the biggest power ceiling. If you can get everything going, and it is position dependent. So, and let's say you're in a late game battle you're at your final 6 warrior build against a 6 human build. Positioning is going to determine that fight more so than anything else. So you need to know what units your units are going to be attacking first and which of your units are going to be getting hit first. So there's more thinking than at first glance that goes involved into piloting the build in the end game, and especially at to high rank. But I think it has all like the best units. Like every single unit that it runs is like one of the strongest units in the game.
I think that's definitely worth noting. Not only does it have more matching heroes than any other combo in 9, it also has a significant number of top-end units that are all incredibly useful on their own, but even better when used as part of the warrior combo.
And more and more people are running Undead to kind of combat the warriors, and I've seen less people are running warriors. Like it used to be every game, almost everybody.
Yeah.
And people are exploring other things, and there's a lot of other good options now, which I think has helped, and it also has helped the warrior get a little bit better because it's kind of easier to get the units now if you can stick with it.
Less competition, absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think it's quite as dominant as it was before some of these changes were made and some of these other builds came to light. There are definitely other builds that can beat it and can combat it. Talking late game, end of the game, final build, level 10, everything 2-starred. It's just so consistent and so strong.
Yes. Yeah, that's probably the key for me, in that it's one of the most consistent builds just because of the sheer number of heroes available and the versatility provided among all the heroes. You're very rarely going to be losing before top 3 if you can get the build happening.
Yeah, and like you were saying before, there's 9 warriors. So to be able to get to that 6 warrior power spike, it's the easiest six of synergy to get in the game, just because a lot of the units are low cost. A lot of the units there's a ton of them, and it's flexible. You can meld the build in different directions depending on which of the warriors you get to 2-starred. And it also has that hard carry in Berserker. So if you can get that 3-star potential huge unit, it has that Berserker to be right up, or Dancer, Devourer, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So to wrap up this video, I think we'll just do a quick rehash of the significant combos that we talked through, those that are sitting high up on that tier list. So if you just wanted to recap some of those, Warrior.
Sure, and what I was thinking is, for the next video, we're going to be going a little bit more in depth into some of the combos. So when I say what the top builds are, I'll also include some of the synergies that go along with it.
Yeah, and absolutely. That would be great.
And we can dive into the details in the next video. So I think I would say top builds, no specific order. Let's say top 3, 6 Assassin, 3 Elf, 2 Undead, 2 Warlock. It's just incredible build as far as overall strength and burst potential. Say 6 human, and with a 3 to 6 sorcerers, 2 warlock, and then I like to add legendary units. We were talking about this a bit earlier, but whatever legendaries you can fit in with that sorcerer build, and whether you end up going 6 sorcerers with the 6 humans or 3 sorcerers and legendary units, it's just going to be dependent on what you get that game. But that 6 human sorcerers and magic damage build, very good. Next is the 6 warrior build, and that's my long time now, which is going to be 6 warriors. You just want to use the highest cost warriors you can, really, that match your synergies. And then you're going to go 2 undead, 2 warlock, and 2 Oceanborn a lot of the time through the Kraken and Shark.
Yeah,
that build can also. That's one of those builds that can also use hunters, throughout, and then maybe sub out that 3rd hunter in the late game. or maybe even keep it in if, let's say, you have a really stacked up drone, elf hunter, or something like that.
Yeah, sure.
And I think that's about it. I'd say those are really the top three bad boys right now that really should be looking to build.
Yeah, I agree with that. And just in terms of a little bit of variety, maybe one or two that are right on the bubble. So Cyborg Engineer, for instance, is one that's kind of just below.
Punisher.
Yeah, so okay, so they're probably the next two that not
And
quite as
Rider.
powerful. Oh yeah, Rider, of course, too. Very versatile. So I think based on that, the meta is definitely in a pretty healthy position right now. It's not just one build that's dominating everything. It's definitely quite a few builds that are up there that are quite powerful, and any of them can kind of beat any other build if you've got the right pieces.
Exactly. It's really all about just building what you can without having to roll, and then getting that most powerful late game comp based on what you're offered each game. So it's not like you should just always go 6 warriors or always go 6 assassins. You just want to build towards what the most value that you can to the end game. So without spending as least the money, you want to spend as least money as possible and get as powerful as possible. Which just sounds obvious, but it kind of goes against the idea of forcing any build.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me on this video. This has been some incredible information you've been able to share, mate.
Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to doing it again soon.
Yeah, awesome. Until next time, everyone, thank you so much for checking out this video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time.
Peace.